So now we've talked about, given y is equal to mx plus b, how to actually sketch a graph of this equation. How could you reverse this process, go from the graph to the actual equation itself? So up to this point, we've talked about, well, the letter m represents the slope, so I'll put that here. M is our slope, and we have a formula for it. Well, what does the value b represent? And it's going to be the y value of the y-intercept. So I'll just put the y-intercept like this. So if you look at this graph and you want to know the equation that represents this graph, you just need to know two things. What's the slope and what's the y-intercept? You can then put that information into this equation and you're done. Let's start with slope since we talked about that in the previous lesson. If I want to know the slope of this line, I know we define that kind of as the rise over the run. We had a more formal definition, but I think this is going to be good enough for this example. So I'm going to pick a point. I guess I'll choose this point here. And I see I can travel from this point to this one and end up on the line again. So I'll mark that one as well. And the question is, how far did I go over the run and how far did I go up the rise to travel between these 2 points? This is over 1 and up 1, 2, 3. I can see directly from this graph that the slope is 3 over 1. Or if you would like, just put 3. So that is saying I go over 1 and up 3. Over 1 and up 3. You could have used a lot of different points to figure this out. The only other thing we need to know is, what is this value b? So it's going to be the y value of the y-intercept, and I can see that that is right here. So I'm going to mark that on my graph as well. This is the point for the y-intercept. It's 0, -4, but b actually represents the y value for this point. So that is b. b is equal to -4. And at this point, we have our equation. The equation is y is equal to 3 times x minus 4. So you can even verify this pretty easily. You could say, okay, if this was the equation I started with, this -4 means you go to this spot on the y-axis. The slope of 3 over 1 means you go over 1 and up 3. And okay, everything seems to match up that this equation would give me this graph. In example 2, I'd like to do pretty much what we did in example 1, where I want to find the equation of the line, y equals mx plus b, that represents this equation. But specifically, I want to focus on, well, what if you only knew the information 2, 4 and -4, 7? What is the equation that goes between these 2 points? So I'm kind of providing us with a graph just as a guide to walk through this process. So to do this, I'm going to mark these 2 points on this equation. So starting with 2, 4, that's going to be here. And then -4, 7 is right here. So I want to figure out, what is the line that goes between those 2 points? I need to know the slope, and I need to know the y-intercept. So I'm going to actually use the formula for slope this time just to practice this process. So step 1, I want to find the slope. And we're going to use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This would be really useful if you didn't have a graph of your equation. Okay, so my 2 points are 2, 4, which I labeled as blue. I think I'll call this x1, y1. And then the point -4, 7, which I label as green, and I'll put that as x2, y2. If I want to know the slope between these 2 points, I do y2 minus y1, so that is 7 minus 4, all over x2 minus x1, which is -4 minus 2. And when I simplify this, m is equal to 3 over negative 6, and that reduces to negative 1/2. So in terms of finding the equation of my line, it's like I'm halfway done. Whatever the formula is, it's got to be y is equal to, I just solve for the slope, it's negative 1/2 x, but I just don't know what b is equal to. So I know we could just like look at our graph here and say, oh, okay, looks like the answer is 5. But I want to try to do this without relying on the graph itself. I want to use this information here to try to figure out if we can solve for b. So that's step 2. I want to find b. So to do this, I'm going to take one of my 2 points, and it doesn't matter which, so I think I'll choose this point here. 2 is an x value and 4 is a y value. I'm going to plug that information into this equation, so something will be in place of x and something will be in place of y. That will allow me to solve for b. So let's go through that. So to find b, I'm going to use the point 2, 4, where x is 2 and y is 4. You could have used the other point, but I chose this one first. Okay, so in my equation, wherever I see a y, I'm going to put a 4. So I get 4 is equal to negative 1/2. And wherever I see an x, I'm going to put a 2. And the only thing I don't know is b. So again, what we're doing is we're taking this equation after we figured out the slope. I'm choosing a point, putting something in place of x, something in place of y to solve for b. Going back to this equation, if I simplify this, okay, I have negative 1/2 times 2. This 2 and that 2 can simplify to just 1. My equation is 4 is equal to negative 1 plus b. And to solve for b, I can add 1 to both sides, and I get that b is equal to 5. Which is great because it actually matches up with what is in this picture right here. So here's my final answer. The equation is y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 5. It was a 2-step process. I first used the formula for slope to get this value here. Then I used one of my 2 points to figure out the value for b.